Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Paco Maradian here at the Halifax International Security Forum in Nova Scotia, Canada, one of the world's truly great security conferences. Our coverage here is sponsored by Boeing and Leonardo DRS, and it's our absolute honor and pleasure to be interviewing again Canada's Minister of National Defense, Harjit Singh Sajjan, who is a decorated soldier, extraordinary police officer in his own right, and now again renewed as Canada's Defense Minister. Sir, congratulations on another term.
No, thank you so much. It's a privilege to serve the women and men who serve all of us.
New priorities and a very, very ambitious investment program going from 19 billion Canadian dollars up to 32 billion by 2024, which is very, very ambitious. Obviously, Canada has come under some pressure from your closest allies down south, seeking to get closer to that 2% of GDP and 20% investment goal. Talk to us about some of your priorities. What are your top priorities now that you have an extension in office?
Well, first of all, one of the main priorities is Canada. Through our consultations, the defense policy that was approved is the number one priority. And in that defense policy, chapter number 1 focuses on the women and men who serve us and their families as well. We believe that making sure that they are when they are looked after, we will be far more operationally effective. And that's exactly what we're doing right now. So the implementation of the defense policy is extremely important because it's so vast, it actually comes with all the money that's part of building up our capabilities. So building out the implementation of the defense policy was a very important component that we did in our last mandate. So now the implementation of that plan moving forward is going to be top of mind.
When you're looking at delivering capabilities, that's something very important. Canada likes to think that you're batting way above your size league and funding league. But what are some of the concrete modernization programs you want to undertake? I know that the fighter is on it. I'm not going to pry too deeply because I know that you guys have a process that's getting underway. But talk to us about the discrete capabilities that Canada has to beef up to get back into that great power mold while still having the capability to respond to the kind of crises as you did in Afghanistan.
No, absolutely. And I think, so we focused on was not about just strictly about equipment. What we didn't want was a shopping list and then trying to figure out what do we do with it. What we wanted to do was get the analysis of what are our threats now, what are the threats into the future, what are the capabilities that it require, what are the number of people that are going to be required for it. Then from those capabilities, we built out what's needed. And the modernization that's occurring is going to be all the services, including the special forces. So, for example, right now, the Army will be getting all the lab armored vehicles have been upgraded. Everything from their logistic vehicles, communication systems, the Navy, 15 surface combatants, 6 Arctic offshore patrol ships. And I was just on the bridge of the Harry DeWolf, the first one that's actually on sea trials. But let's not forget from the Air Force, obviously from the aircraft, but there's all the intangible things that we don't get to talk about. For example, we had 3 satellites that we just launched, which plays a very important role into the Arctic. And the internal work that we're doing inside to making sure we have the right systems in place, things that don't, you don't get to talk about much, but are absolutely critical. Having air defense capability, UAV systems that we didn't have before, brand new capabilities, cyber trade. But let's not forget about, for us as a nation working with our allies, we must stay at the cutting edge of our technology. And to do this, you need to invest in the right research and development to be innovative. And that's one thing that I'm very proud of, that in our defense policy, we not only have the plan for it, but we actually have the funding, $1.6 billion, strictly to look at new challenges for defense.
And I know that Canada, for example, is a leader in artificial intelligence technology and all sorts of other stuff. Let me ask you a little bit, one question on the fighter program. You said you want to maintain Canada on the cutting edge. Canada has been a partner on the F-35 program from the beginning. I know a little bit of a checkered past there, and sort of, it was going to be the jet you were going to acquire, then there was a competition, then there was the whole Bombardier thing that we talked about a couple of times, unfortunately. Where are you now on that? Is that F-35 the kind of capability you believe that Canadian forces should have for the future?
Well, we believe that when it comes to very substantial projects like replacing our fighters or even our ships, to make sure that the Canadian Armed Forces get the requirements met, we need to make sure we go through appropriate competition. This is one of the reasons that we disagreed as a government. Sole sourcing for one aircraft was not right. And what we're doing right now is the competition is ongoing. In fact, actually, we have 3 companies, and this is going to be based on our requirements. And from this, a competition will occur, and then the right jet will be selected that will meet our requirements.
I want to get to 3 policy questions, but let me quickly ask you about size of the force. Do you think Canadian Armed Forces could be growing? Because with that amount of money, could be a lot more people, given you guys are really, really stretched around the world.
In fact, actually, we looked at that during our defense policy review, and we realized we needed to grow. So this is in our defense policy. We're growing the regular force. We're growing the reserve force as well, and we're adding a new capability. What we didn't want to do was add in a capability but rob from others, so that we're making sure that the growth that we have meets our requirements. But we also actually we went to the extent to look at what does engaged around the world means. How many people can we deploy without burdening the existing Canadian Armed Forces, so we're able to rotate and sustain it. That's a level of analysis that we have done. So yes, in our defense policy, we will be growing the force. The number of operations that we're conducting, not just in one theater now, we're actually in multiple theaters, something that we did take into account, and now we're executing on that.
And I should point out to the audience that you're a retired reserve lieutenant colonel in the Canadian lieutenant colonel in the Canadian Army. Canada has been increasingly playing a more vocal role as the world's leading champion of freedom and democracy, even if it means that the country comes under pressure, whether it's from Saudi Arabia. There was a lot of courage associated with awarding the McCain Leadership Award to the people of Hong Kong for their demonstrations. Obviously, the Chinese have voiced their opinion on that. Why is it so important? And of course, on Daryl Bricker's extraordinary annual global poll, Canada comes in first as a champion of freedom. Why is it so important from a Canadian perspective? Because there are people, even down south, who are looking increasingly at Canada doing something that the United States used to be in the business of doing, which was advancing freedom and democracy around the world.
I think being in Halifax, right next to Pier 21, that's a really good backdrop to answer this question, where people from all over the world have come here to flee persecutions for a better life. And in Canada, everyone is an immigrant. Whether you came here 10 years ago or if your family came here over 100 years ago. And we acknowledge the fact that it's our First Nation or Indigenous communities who welcomed us and they continue to welcome us. So it's important for us when it comes to human rights, standing up for those values that are so dear to us. This is who we are as Canadians and as a country. We have to reflect the Canada that we have right now. So internationally, we need to be very strong in this regards. But when we have those difficult conversations, and as you've known, we stand up for those conversations, we can still have those discussions. I mean, I would say, Canada can proudly say that we helped invent peacekeeping at the time, looking at difficult conflict situations, and then figuring out how can we have that dialogue and reduce conflict, and that's what we will always do. We'll be proud to be able to stand up, but we also know how to have the right conversations as well.
Do you think there'll be a similar kind of Hong Kong resolution that'll come out of Parliament and be backed by government as well, just like we saw in the United States?
For us, is what we want to do is not only just stand up for those values. What we're, for example, seeing in Hong Kong is concerning to us. We have Canadians who are there. What we want to do is we want to help. The best scenario is for things to de-escalate, making sure that freedom of assembly is respected, that both sides, that violence is not used as a tool from both sides. And so for us is to making sure that we can reach the impact. We can have, for example, with words, what we want to be able to do is work with our allies, have a coordinated response as we have done in the past, so that our words that we put forward has meaning, and it's worked well in the past, and we will continue to do the same thing in the future.
Let me ask you about the integrated China strategy. Peter Van Prague talked about the importance of Halifax creating this sort of alliance-wide where where all democracies around the world come together on a concerted China strategy. Talk to us about how important that is, so that it's not piecemeal in dealing with a very, very important global economic power, a growing voice on the security scene around the world, but at the same time a country that has a very, very checkered human rights history, especially with Uyghurs, not just Hong Kong.
We can't just be talking about one nation. We need to be looking at the entire world. That's what the international focus is about. We need to make sure that we look at all the various challenges, and we sometimes we tend to start looking at a very important issue of one particular area, one particular country. Obviously, it's important, but we need to make sure that we do keep it broad. We need to have a unified voice, and for example, coordinating messaging like we have done, not just in, for example, with regards to Hong Kong. We've done it in Venezuela through the Lima Group. At that time, Foreign Minister Freeland championed. We've done this also when it comes to the pressure on North Korea. For example, the monitoring of sanctions against North Korea, that was the work that we did together by Minister Freeland hosting the foreign affairs ministers of nations that contributed to the conflict in Korea, and us as defense ministers providing the assessments. And so that how can we best, from a defense perspective, support the diplomatic efforts, because that's what's needed. It is diplomacy that is absolutely crucial to move forward, because the impact that we want is better coordinated, but at the same time we need to be respectful how we champion our voice as well.
And one of the first people you're going to be meeting with, internet, although he wasn't here, is Mark Esper, Secretary of Defense for the United States. What's going to be on your new agenda in terms of deepening the partnership and cooperation between two nations that couldn't get closer, but we always managed to figure out ways to do that?
I look forward to meeting Secretary Esper once again. We've already had an opportunity to engage, and we'll continue to have those discussions. One thing is for certain, that the Canada-U.S. defense relationship has grown over time, and this has been demonstrated around the world. I mean, look at the work that we've been able to do with the Counter-Dash coalition, and it's working extremely well. When we're working well, make the adjustments for our Middle East strategy. We are also alongside the Enhanced Forward Presence Battle Group, with Canada and the U.S. Across the Atlantic, leading those battle groups together. And the same thing when it comes to the sanctions monitoring. We are able to now come together, look at the problems, and then figure out what the solutions are going to be. So I look forward to having those discussions, because Canada-U.S. relationship is extremely unique around the world, and our NORAD, is the binational command, is a good representation of that. And through that, through our 5S community, our NATO partnerships, the work at the UN, coordinating the work and the discussion is extremely important. So I look forward to having that discussion with him.
You just triggered one thing, and I know you've got to go, so let me just ask this really quick question. One of the concerns that was voiced by some of the defense ministers here, especially in the Baltics, given Canada's key role in the region now, is that as demonstrations at home for Vladimir Putin increase, that there is a danger that he may try to act out somewhere, whether it's in Belarus or anything like that. Is the alliance as focused on that particular challenge as it starts to emerge, given that the last time there were mass demonstrations on the streets of Russian cities, Vladimir Putin went into Ukraine?
It's when Crimea was illegally annexed by Russia, was a wake-up call to many nations, including NATO, and the really good work that has gone on since then to making sure that we have the appropriate investments by nations into their own in their own defense, which then in having the right capabilities, but then to be able to make sure those right capabilities are contributed to NATO, so we have the impact that is happening, and we've seen many examples of that. For example, whether it's us leading for the second year of the NATO training mission in Iraq, Enhanced Forward Presence Battle Group, the Naval Task Force, and so forth. But making sure that we have the right command and control relationship inside NATO, and the work that's been ongoing there has been extremely fruitful, and we're going to be landing on the right form. But we have to look at it. We got to make sure that NATO is what we call fit for purpose. Is not just fit for purpose for now, but also to be able to adjust so that we're able to anticipate any future challenges. Actually, on that note, I just want to just highlight our Canada's relationship with also with NATO has been. We've stepped up significantly, and how the NATO Secretary General supported efforts to making sure that our two Canadians that were arbitrarily detained in China, that it was called on asking for their release. So as we talked about, when you work together with nations and having that one voice, it sends a very, very strong message, just like our other allies. And when NATO comes together, it sends a very strong and positive message.
Harjit Singh Sajjan, Minister of National Defence for Canada. Sir, thanks very much. I wouldn't imagine this would be a Halifax with us having an opportunity. And all the very best, and hopefully we'll see you in Washington next time you visit.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Look forward to it.